Shalom, and welcome to this home edition of the Middle East Report. And in this program today, we have a very special interview with one of Israel's most leading ambassadors. He has been the Director General of the Israeli Foreign Ministry, together with Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, as well as the UK. Warm welcome to the program. And today's special guest is all the way from Israel. His name is Ron Prosser. Ron, warm welcome to the program. And I have very fond memories of you. I remember you giving a great talk at my university, the University of Manchester, back in 1995. I had the privilege of meeting you in Washington around 2000, in which you kindly invited me into your office in the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. And what's most special of all, when you were Israel's ambassador to the UK, to the Court of St. James, I had the privilege of interviewing you in front of a live studio audience back in 2009 that really did launch my broadcasting career. So I just want to thank you for this opportunity today to interview you.
Simon, and I want to thank you. It's a privilege and an honor to really be interviewed by you. And the passion that you show for the state of Israel and the people of Israel is absolutely amazing. And thank you.
That's an absolute pleasure, Ron. But I mean, you have held so many high positions within Israeli diplomacy. You have been Israel's ambassador to the Court of St. James in the UK. You have been Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, as well as the Director General of the Israeli Foreign Ministry. There isn't any other job you haven't done except be Foreign Minister or Prime Minister yourself. But Ron, where does your story start? Tell us something about your Jewish family and being born in the state of Israel.
So it's a really interesting combination. My father originally came from Berlin, was born in Berlin, and the family really came to then Palestine out of Germany, which is very relevant to my serving in Germany, because it was really like closing a circle and basically a path into my own past. My mother came from a little village in Israel. You know, her parents came from Russia. They were farmers. The family from Berlin were the elites. And it was a nice combination. So I had, you know, warmth on the one side and discipline on the other. My father worked in the Haganah to bring people, you know, through ships. He was in the Navy to Israel. And then he entered the Foreign Service, and I grew as a child in amazing places like Tanganyika in Africa, which changed into Tanzania after the unification with Zanzibar. So in essence, I really through my childhood had the chance to see what the state of Israel and the Jewish people are doing in the world. You know, under Tikkun Olam, and I really connected to this very much. So the background was a very, you know, rooted family here, which was a good combination of showing some of the melt pot which Israel consists of.
Amazing. And you also served in the Israeli Defense Force, reaching the rank of major. Can you share with us your experience of serving in the IDF, which the vast majority of Israelis have to do in order to protect the modern state of Israel?
So in Israel, as you know, at the age of 18, it doesn't make a difference if your father is the king or your mother is the queen. You have to enlist into the army. 3 years for men mandatory and 2 years for women if you want to be an officer an additional year. And for me, it was really a new experience, because through the army, I met parts of the Israeli population that I didn't interact with in school and other places. So it was really an integration, seeing how the army acts as a social mobility factor in Israel's society and brings people together from all over with different backgrounds. And if you're good, the army would teach you the army would look at things on merit. And I think this is the great equalizer of the Israeli society. So on the one hand, you make friends for life. You know, we don't have to meet for years. The minute we meet, it's friendship, which was on the battlefield, friendship, which was in hard times, and like I said, you know, it brings us together, men and women, uh, and I think it creates a more cohesive society, a society which knows very well why it has to go to the army. Because if we look around us, as you know, we don't have Liechtenstein and Luxembourg surrounding us.
No, absolutely. The world's most toughest neighborhood. Rob, what lessons would you say that you've actually learned from your time serving in the IDF, reaching the rank of major, and how has that helped you in your extraordinary diplomatic career in the Israeli Foreign Ministry?
So I think the issue of group work, working with people, in teamwork, leadership skills. Because at the end of the day, you have to show leadership at times which are very harsh, and people will not go and follow you if they don't really feel that you're worth the leadership role. It's discipline, which we all at the age of 18 do not have, and I wasn't any different. And at the end of the day, you come with a very good feeling of the importance of teamwork, respecting one another, and different views, leadership skills, and operational implementation of getting things done. The army, you need to get things done. So you set a goal and you try and attain it. So I think the army acts as a very, very important tool in Israel's society and gave me a lot. I remember this time as a very, very, very important time in, my whole, I think, identity as a person.
Amazing. And you also attended and graduated with a master's degree in political science from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. What was it about politics and international relations that drew your interest, really?
Look, this is, it's funny that you asked because already in the army, at the gastiest hours in the evening, I used to stand with some officers and talk to them about what's happening in the world, in the UK, in the United States, and it always interested me in what the world looked like, how the world sees Israel, but not just Israel. It was really understanding what I would call world politics, geography. So it was something that really intrigued me to study political science and international relations. And I think it's very, for me at least, it's amazing how decisions are made, the importance of people, personal relationships. Yes, there are interests between states and nations, but the personal relationships are also crucial. And and again, on the international arena, to really try and understand how people think, how different countries think. And by the way, Simon, I always say, when you try and analyze something, you always have to remember not just how you think, on how you see, but also how the other side looks at things, and what are the places you can compromise, what you can not compromise. It's always important to see both sides of the coin and then act, clearly for your own national security interests. But to understand, it's important to listen and to really try and rationalize the other side's, I would say, decision-making process.
And Ron, I didn't know about this about you until I actually started doing the research of the program. But after you graduated from the Hebrew U, you actually wrote articles for the Times and the Daily Telegraph and the Guardian. So you could have had a very distinguished career in journalism rather than Israeli diplomacy. Can you share with us what it was like actually writing for these big and very influential British broadsheets?
But I wasn't, I wasn't on the writing, staff. So it was, things that I wrote here and there. And it's not the only difference is when you're in position is that the minute you write, it's already being, seen as, aha, this is the official angle. This is, how the state looks, and then it's, the reader already, positions you in a certain place. So I think uh, I would use that in saying that I understood that the media is a real player in trying to influence how the public thinks from a very young age. And I still think that this is really, really unique. There have been complete changes in the media and social networks and everything, which we have to adapt to, and not to say, hey, we remember how it was. But from my point of view, the idea is, messaging and to really try and tell people what's going on in a way that they can connect to, either with humor, sarcasm, or give them analogies that they can connect from what they do.
Excellent. And Ron, yeah, you could have chosen to write for American publications or Australian or New Zealand publications, but you chose to write for British newspapers. Did that start your kind of interest with Britain, because you have such a close connection to our country, and also, you served as Israel's ambassador. And I think in all my experience of working with various other Israeli ambassadors, in my personal opinion, I think you've been the finest.
I would say if something is left from the great British Empire, it's a media empire. It's BBC, TV and radio, Sky, Financial Times, The Economist, all the broadsheets, and all in English, Simon. Hence, what is written and said in the UK, because of the language, goes way and beyond the boundaries of the United Kingdom. That's why the British media has, I think, a world influence. And that's how I looked at it strategically. And yes, Corriere della Sera is important, Le Monde, Frankfurter Allgemeine, but when it's in English and it's done in such a, an amazing media, environment, I think this is absolutely unique for the United Kingdom.
Absolutely. And Ron, what was it about the Israeli Foreign Ministry that attracted you to actually join and really follow in the footsteps of Israel's greatest ever spokesman, Abba, who was not only Israel's first ambassador to the United Nations, but also served as Israel's foreign minister with distinction?
So I thought that by joining the Foreign Service, I would be able to, represent the state of Israel and tell the world, what Israel is all about. Because uh, look, Israel is nearly a miracle. 1948, after the Holocaust, people coming in from all over the world into this holy land, that the Almighty, as you know, promised us the land of milk and honey. When we got there, there was no milk, no honey, and no money. So we had to work from scratch, drip irrigation, find simple solutions, but, create an amazing society, which was, also socialistic in its men and women, on an equal footing. We had Golda Meir and Indira Gandhi were the first women prime ministers in the world. So it was, a new society, which I thought that Israel was an amazing place to live in, and that the world should know what Israel is all about.
Absolutely. So, can you tell us about your first diplomatic posting to Bonn in what was then East Germany in the kind of mid 1980s? Describe your experience of representing Israel to the government of East Germany.
So first and foremost, usually the first posting is a hardship posting, but because of my German language skills and some luck, I came to Germany, to Bonn, the former capital of the Federal Republic of Germany, in 1988. 9th of November 1989, the wall in Berlin falls. And in essence, this was, just think, it was like a terra incognita that we have to work suddenly in the former East Germany. And for me, like I said at the beginning, it was like a path and a hole, into my own past. So it was, a journey into my past of my family roots from my father's side, and to see Germany unite between East Germany and West Germany was something that I think, is not just historical. It was unique to see that and be part of this. And it was, I think, this was something that people in the foreign ministry said, hey, who's this guy, Ron Prosser, in Bonn, who was going out to East Germany, to Dresden, to Schwerin, to Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, and writing and saying, things that everyone listened to. It was like lights off, spot on. Everyone looked at Germany. So the unification process, the problems, how they managed to overcome them, not everything, was for me very, very unique, and it was an amazing posting. We were there for 4 years until 1992, and was really an amazing start for my diplomatic career. Everywhere I got to, Simon, something happened.
No, absolutely. And then in the 90s, you were posted to the UK in charge of the Israeli embassy's media department, that you were the spokesman for the embassy. How would you describe your first time serving Israel in this country of ours, Great Britain?
So it's tough. As you know, both the media scene is tough, and at the university level, and again, this is something which is very unique for the UK. Like I said before about the media, just think, students flock into the United Kingdom, Simon, in their formative years, and they flock into the United Kingdom because of an unprecedented university diversity. It's not just Oxford and Cambridge and King's and Imperial. It's Glasgow and Edinburgh and Leeds and Manchester. You see, I didn't miss saying Manchester.
I'm pleased.
And just think, everyone flocks in, and here there's a real fight on ideas on what Israel is all about. And I thought that this was a big challenge then, and the challenge has grown very much since I got here as ambassador.
Excellent. And Ron, we've seen that you've moved rooms now into your office. So we're getting a great view of your wonderful apartment. Can you share with us what that picture is behind you? Is that you speaking at the United Nations?
This is speaking outside of the Security Council at the United Nations. And like serving as Israel's ambassador to the United Nations was quite a challenge. I think the United Nations not united on anything, maybe against Israel. That's the only thing they're united about.
So after your posting to the court of St. James, the Israeli embassy in Britain, you moved to the United States, which for any aspiring Israeli diplomat is surely the biggest embassy that Israel has in the world, and also Israel's most strategic and important relationship. What was it like to be the political advisor to Israel's ambassador to the United States?
So, Simon, first of all, our viewers have to remember what time it was. I got to Washington in 1998. So, 1998, Wye River Memorandum. Then in 2000, Camp David, peace talks, and then the transition from Clinton to Bush, which was amazing to see that. And last but not least, 9/11. And so those were amazing 4 years. And I think, there's no better friend for the state of Israel than the United States of America, and the people of the United States really shared values. So from an Israeli perspective, this is really the hub of Israel's national security interests, foreign and defense. And the minute you understand that and you see how the United States of America works, the inside of this machine, I think this really gives you the option to go to higher level positions in Israel because it's really, really unique. And I had 4 very unique years in Washington, D.C.
And also, can you share with us something about the formation of Israeli foreign policy? Because your first prime minister, David Ben-Gurion, who was an incredible visionary, recognized that if this small state of Israel was to survive, then she needed that protection of a superpower. So the whole of Israeli foreign policy has really been geared up to gain the support and the trust of the United States. And of course, that relationship has flourished so well. So, can you share with us how important it is that Israel has the backing of the United States, particularly in its historical context within the Cold War?
Yes, so people forget that at the beginning of the establishment of the State of Israel, basically since till the Six-Day War, Israel had a strategic relationship with France. Most of Israel's aircraft, the Mirage aircraft, came from France. And because Israel did a preemptive strike, which, after all the Arab states surrounded us, the Egyptians and others, the French put an embargo on Israel. And then from that, from that point of, that year on, Israel moved more to the United States of America. And the US became really not just a friend of the state of Israel, but it was, like I said, shared values. And also strategically, Israel was seen by the United States as like the United States aircraft carrier in the region. Israel was a full-fledged democracy in a sea of dictatorships. So in the sense, for Israel, the United States has become a pillar of support in the toughest times. And when Israel really, a friend in need is a friend indeed, as they say, and the United States show that. So today, even when it's obvious to us that we have to, pivot over a bit to Asia with China, Japan, and others, Simon, still I think it's clear that the pillar for this relationship is the United States, and the support on both sides of the aisle in Congress, which represents the American people.
Absolutely, and I had the pleasure of having a coffee with you in your office in the Israeli embassy in Washington D.C. when I was working there, which was an amazing experience. Can you just share with us some stories that you have of working at the Israeli embassy in Washington? I mean, you mentioned the fact that you had the Wye River Agreement. We also in 2000 had the Camp David Accords. So you would have been involved in that high-level peace negotiations between Ehud Barak and Yasser Arafat of the PLO, and then the start of the horrific Second Intifada, and then, as you mentioned, 9/11. So these were very, very turbulent years, weren't they? Both for the United States, but also for the state of Israel.
So if I had to pick one thing, Simon, that I think overrides everything, is 9/11. You know, here I sit at my desk at the embassy, and the TV is open, and I'm writing a telegram, and I see the first plane coming in, and I look, and here you would probably think I would say, hey, I understood that the world is going to change. But no, I continued to write the telegram. Then the second plane came in, and in essence, suddenly, me as an Israeli and many Israelis, I think we felt empathy, we felt sympathy, we felt, that the United States of America, in the sense, is now being subjected to terror, that Israel understands what it means to be under terror, and the roots of terror, and you cannot really do anything but fight terrorism, because if you don't fight it, you'll find it on your doorstep. So 9/11 was also the time where you saw the United States change. It's like, an aircraft carrier understanding that it has to really turn in order to confront those who committed the terror, and of course the roots. And the cooperation between Israel and the United States even intensified during this time because of the vast experience that Israel had both with airports and with airplanes. Just remember that Israel began checking people at airports 25 years ago, and people told us, oi, 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 this is intrusion of privacy. And of course, democracies have to find ways to defend themselves. And the real issue here is to defend yourself on the one hand and not go overboard in your reaction. But still, was a huge challenge for democracies. And I think the United States in 9/11 changed. And this was, I think, for me, someone who was there, very, very important.
And Rob, after your posting to Washington, D.C., you were made was it the deputy director of the Israeli Foreign Ministry. Then you became the Director General of the Israeli Foreign Ministry, the top job in terms of actually running the entire Israeli Foreign Ministry and playing a huge role in formulating Israeli foreign policy. Can you share with us what it was like to be in this very prestigious position, knowing that you were the head of the Israeli Foreign Ministry?
So first, to remember, Simon, that I started as a cadet in the foreign ministry, second secretary, the lowest form of animal life in the sense. Second secretary, first secretary, counselor, minister counselor, then ambassador. So it was a good feel, to really receive the steering wheel of Israel's foreign service. Amazing people, with, of course, a lot of, suddenly you have to see the whole world. So you're not just focused on Washington, you're focused on the whole world. You're focused on families, their welfare, and of course, things that you want to do, and especially, things that I did as Director General in the Gulf. I think I flew and visited the Gulf and created infrastructure there where it was still science fiction, not today where everyone flies over to Dubai, to Morocco, to Tunisia. It was, I was the Director General during disengagement out of Gaza, which was also a tough internal Israeli issue, which wasn't easy, but and had to be also conveyed to the international community. So it was, from my point of view, the top job that any cadet can think of. But on the other hand, a huge challenge and also responsibility, because most of the people in the foreign ministry I grew up with, and it had to be, sometimes trying to differentiate between your personal affiliations and the professional side. But from a professional point of view, it was a huge privilege, and again, in a very, very intensive time for Israel's internal and foreign policy.
Could you just share with us, because it kind of be fascinating for our viewers to know how Israel actually formulates her foreign policy? Because we know that, as you described earlier in the interview, that Israel lives in the toughest neighborhood in the world. Israel's not living next to Switzerland or Luxembourg, or in the United States, between the United States and Canada, which is the safest border in the world. Israel also has a kind of a society that is a melting pot of Jewish communities from the four corners of the earth, with no natural resources until recently finding natural gas. So how does Israel go about formulating her kind of foreign policy, and what are her main foreign policy objectives?
Israel's foreign policy is formulated in a combination of course, Israel's foreign service, the defense establishment, which is very dominant in Israel, because the security elements have a direct effect on policy, and the National Security Advisor. All those organs basically come together, and it's hand in hand, I think, much more than in other countries. Israel, for example, on formulating foreign policy, I remember in the times of Golda Meir, we wanted to make a point in Africa. So there was a lot of investment in Africa, which was a combination of both, Israel wanting to share our knowledge with African countries, and also the feeling that this is part of who we are as Jews, Tikkun Olam. And for example, working with the Arab countries, which I, as Director General, just mentioned before, it was something which is part of Israel's foreign policy, in order to create a circle of countries which Israel is in a peace agreement with, that will allow the element of people to come in, because the more we get to know each other, the less animosity, the less anxieties that we feel towards each other. So this was, creating and trying to move that. I remember using a model that we worked in the former Soviet Union with culture as the opening into a next step, which was political cooperation. So we started with cultural relations with the former Soviet Union. In the Arab world, we started with economic relations as the beginning of formulating political connections, because of the sensitivities, of the internal sensitivities in the Arab world. So in essence, if you ask me how policy is crafted, it's in Israel, it's much quicker. When I compare the United States as a aircraft carrier, then Israel would be a sailing boat or a Zodiac. We have to react very fast to things that are happening. And I think Israel has the ability to do that, because the challenges are always around the corner and always surprising in the Middle East.
And Ron, after your time as being the Director General of the Israeli Foreign Ministry, you appointed to be Israel's ambassador to the Court of St. James, to the United Kingdom. What was it like coming back to the Israeli embassy in London, but this time as her ambassador?
First of all, it's interesting because it's with a family. It's understanding that now basically you call the shots here, and I have to tell you that the challenge that I saw as an ambassador was really, really tough. Don't forget, in the mid-90s, Israel enjoyed still the issue of after the Oslo Accords. And when I got back as ambassador, the challenges both at the university level, in the public domain, and the media was much, much tougher towards Israel. And I think that if I had to brand it for you, the UK was especially tough because of what we talked about in the past. So from my point of view, it was, trying to deepen the economic relationship between Israel and the UK. We connected, we created something which is called the BIRACS, which is on the scientific cooperation between scientists in universities in the UK and in Israel. The idea was to create structures that when people talk to each other, scientists or economists or, culture, you create the structures that even when there's a political animosity, you're able to bridge that. And the relationship between Israel and the UK is absolutely important. And I have to admit that for me, also dealing with the Jewish community in the UK was also very important. I felt that this is a proud and good community that needed support in times which are not easy.
Absolutely. And in September 2009, it was the first time in our studios which we had the capacity to have an audience. So I did an interview with you with a live studio audience, which was absolutely fabulous. But which brings me on to the very important point. What role does the support of Christian evangelicals play in supporting Israel and defending the Jewish state?
It's an amazing support, both in the United Kingdom, in the United States. It's look, and because you saw me also in Washington, this is a feeling of a bond of people who really understand, that making the differentiation of uh, even something which in today's world sounds odd in good and bad, differentiating between good and bad. Who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? What's happening here? And I feel that the fact that we have such support, and we have to work on it. This support has to be worked on a daily basis. But for Israel, it's absolutely crucial. It's crucial because we don't have many friends, and we don't have many friends as the evangelists who are really with us, with a heart, with a head, and really with it's always intrigued me and to see the passion and the determination and in a sense the love that we receive from you, and it's crucial. It's part of what I would call Israel's strength that comes also from within, but also very importantly from the outside. So thank you.
No, it's a pleasure. And I know that I'm speaking for the vast majority of our viewers that we have a love and a passion for Israel and the Jewish people. And we're living in these historic times where we have to stand up for Israel and the Jewish people. It's almost like a biblical command to do so, but it comes from our heart. It doesn't come from any other kind of motivation. And that's why it was so special to do that interview I did with you back in 2009. Ron, you were then appointed probably into the hot seat of Israeli diplomacy and definitely following in the footsteps of Ban by being appointed as Israel's ambassador to the United Nations. Can you share with us your experience of representing Israel in the UN Security Council and to the United Nations?
So first, getting to the United Nations, you have to really understand what we are talking about here. This is the just think of the parliament of the world. But it's 22 countries of the Arab League, 56 countries of the Organization of Islamic Countries, and 126 countries of the non-alignment movement. So the environment structurally and institutionalized is really very, very biased towards Israel. And I think I coined the phrase of triple standards, Simon. It's not double standards, it's triple standards at the UN. One standard for democracies, one standard for dictatorships, and a special standard for Israel, which is unattainable. For example, Israel, from its establishment till the year 2000, was not part of any regional group at the United Nations. Okay, the regional group, only through the regional group you can get voted to a position, run a committee, do it. We were not there. Okay. Only in 2000 we got in and things began to change. But in the sense, in the Council on Human Rights, which I call the Council on Human Wrongs, it's like having Jack the Ripper run Scotland Yard, Simon. And it's like, it's unbelievable. There's an article, a lot is unbelievable. There's an article 4 that deals with human rights violations all over the world, and a specific article 7 that singles out only one country in the world, and that's Israel. So basically you say, hey, aren't we at least good enough to be with Libya, Syria, and North Korea? And why do you have to, create a special article for us? So the structural bias towards Israel is something that even for me, with all the experience after 30 years, was really hard to see. And it's not just the bad guys. It's sometimes the like-minded countries, which voting patterns, you basically say, wow, this is unbelievable. How can, like-minded countries, vote in such a manner against Israel? So this was very unique on the one hand. On the other side, it also gives you an amazing vantage point on seeing the whole world, Simon, and the problems of the world. It can be with global warming of countries that, suddenly the oceans rise and they feel, that they won't have their country anymore. And it's countries like Brazil or India who sit in as non-permanent members in the Security Council and say, this is why are we non-permanent members? Why do the French and the Brits have a veto power? We are India, we are Brazil. This is not 1945. This is 2010 or 11. So in the sense, you see the problems that the world has, and you also see how at the end of the day, on the political side, the UN does a lot of good things, Simon, a lot of good things. Sustainable development, disabilities, World Health Organization, a lot of good stuff. But on the political side, it's basically not relevant in places of real conflict. The UN, because of its structures and the bias, doesn't really solve problems. But I think it's important to have the UN and, of course, change and reform it.
Absolutely. And Ron, you're currently the head of the abba Institute of International Diplomacy at the Interdisciplinary Center in Herzliya. Share with us what this role involves and what you're doing now.
So we are trying to bring diplomacy to the 21st century and make it, more relevant, more effective, and more efficient in the sense. And what do I mean beyond the words, okay? If you look in today's world, just think if you use Israel is a startup nation. We have to be able to use this technology also in diplomacy. So let's take face recognition, an amazing solution to visas, to passports, that you can basically move forward in a different dimension. Virtual reality, just think, Simon. Someone can sit now in Manchester and I can run you with virtual reality through tunnels of Hezbollah or Hamas. Hezbollah up in the north and Hamas, and you really feel that you're there. And big data in really understanding the crowd that you want to convey a message to. How does the crowd, really? So in the sense, when I say to move diplomacy into the 21st century, this is what we're trying to do. We also specifically began dealing with the designation of Hezbollah in Europe, where in Europe they make the differentiation between the military wing and the political wing, which is absolutely artificial. And the idea was to show Europe what Hezbollah is doing on European soil. How is it using and abusing the population with drug trafficking, with money laundering, with charities. Just think of a wonderful woman, Hildegard, who goes in Germany to donate to one of those charities. She doesn't know that the charities that she is donating money basically gives money to buy weapons for Hezbollah. So in the sense, we're trying to really do something on the diplomatic domain, and we were quite successful. Designating, the UK decided to designate the political wing, Germany, Austria, other countries also, and I think we really did a lot to make a difference in this field.
Absolutely. And to our viewers, if you want to have and read really good articles about Israel, then the IHC is a great place to go and a brilliant resource for information to give that inside view of what's happening in Israel and the Middle East. Ron, we've got about 2 questions to go before the end of this very special interview. What are your thoughts on this new Israeli government? We also have a new prime minister for the first time in 12 years in Naftali Bennett. And how would you recommend to Naftali Bennett that Israel should adapt or adopt a certain foreign policy stance that is maybe different from his predecessor, who had great success in reaching out to the Arab world, as well as creating new alliances in Europe, and has gone on to become Israel's longest standing prime minister, and that's Benjamin Netanyahu?
So I would look at this government as a really constructive experiment, because really this is absolutely unique, where you have in one government, the whole diversity of Israel's political spectrum. And what I really am very optimistic about is that this government will deal with the problems structurally that we have internally, and also I think externally. But you can't expect things, on the policy or political side to be very dramatic, because the government is comprised of the complete left and the complete right. But internally, on structures in Israel's economy, on the way we, our health system, I think this government is really a positive change. In every country, you need change, and I think in Israel, this change now is unique. We're just 1 month, but when I see the ministers working and people that you wouldn't even imagine, Simon, it can only happen in Israel. This is a real miracle. People who wouldn't talk to each other, well, basically, they are now in a government that tries to move forward, which is not going to be easy. But I think this government can reach, because of the way it is comprised, I think it can really achieve a lot. And it depends if they're able to maintain this working together as a united coalition. They have a majority of 61 out of 120, and it's going to be a uphill battle every day. But look, this is Israel. We've always, our political system, when you at the UK look at this, You say, oh my God, how can you run something like this? And the truth is, coming from a country where you have both the Tories and the Labor, maybe the Lib Dems a bit, but in the sense, a minister deals with his ministry and doesn't deal with anything else. In Israel, this would be science fiction. Now it looks like everyone is dealing with what they're really supposed to deal with and not look at other things. And who knows, maybe we'll change, but I'm very optimistic.
And Ron, do you have a message for our Christian viewers who, because of COVID-19 and the restrictions, we can't go and visit the land of Israel. We can't visit the Jewish state. And I know that myself and many others are longing to go back and see Israel again. So do you have a message for our Christian viewers who love Israel, who love the Jewish people, and who've actually very much cherished this interview that I've done with you today?
So first, to all my Christians, brothers and sisters all around the world, first we should say next year in Jerusalem. So this year with COVID, it's tough, but I think it's opening up. As you know, Israel, I think, is number one in the world. But I think that connecting, and today, through your program, Simon, and seeing also Jerusalem from this different aspects. I know it's not being there, not touching, but it still, gives you a feeling that, look, I can tell you that when I walk the streets of Jerusalem, and I was born in Jerusalem, it's like walking on the shoulders of giants. Everywhere you go, you automatically think back and you say, wow, we're all privileged, and we have to cherish and try and keep this connection. And I really want to use this opportunity, Sam, first and foremost, to thank you personally, who I've always had an amazing relationship with and huge respect for. And through you, to all your viewers and all our Christian friends around the world, and to say thank you. Thank you for supporting us, to being with us and thinking of us all year round. We cherish that. We give you a big hug from Jerusalem and wish to see you as soon as possible here in the Holy Land. Thank you.
That'd be fantastic. And I just thank you so much for giving up your time, Ron, to be with us today and to just look back at your remarkable diplomatic career in which you followed in the great footsteps of the great man himself, Abri Banner, and that you are one of Israel's leading ambassadors and diplomats. And thank you for all the work and dedication you've done in serving the modern state of Israel.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you very, very much.
It's a pleasure. And I just want to thank you for watching this home edition of the Middle East Report at Home. We've had an exclusive interview with Ambassador Professor Ron Prosser, who not only was Israel's ambassador to the UK, but also to the United Nations, and was the Director General of the Israeli Foreign Ministry, to give that insight view in how Israel formulates her foreign policy. And we have to continue to pray for Israel. We have to continue to speak up for Israel, because we are living in extraordinary times, and we need to show that love and support for Israel and the Jewish people with this rise of Jew hatred that we're seeing around the world today. And the best way we can do that is to visit Israel herself. So thank you for watching this home edition of the Middle East Report.